Hello and welcome to Planning for the Unexpected, episode 5 in our series presented by the Older Women's Network of New South Wales. I'm Amanda Armstrong, and as usual, our expert guest is Alice Mantel, specialist in elder law and family law. Hello, Alice.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for letting me join you again.
Today's topic is called Managing Your Aging Parents. It can be a really difficult life stage, Alice, don't you think?
Yes, Amanda. I think today is much more about sharing our insights from lived experience rather than focusing on the legal issues, although I can't resist but throw in a few legal opinions every now and again.
Okay, well look, we do welcome your comments and your questions, and if you're watching live, you just can simply type your question into the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. And of course, as usual, our discussion is general. And if you need specific advice, there are some really good online resources and counselling services available. So do seek them out. Now, Alice, I guess our parents have been looking after us since we were born, obviously. And then we become adults. And then things change.
And that's where we start managing our parents. Actually, you just struck the exact issue. Our parents have always looked after us from day one, through school, through university, whatever. They have proven experience as being competent, reliable people, and they've protected you from the many bad things that can happen in the world because they knew more than you did.
So we're going from a kind of a more equal relationship as adults, even peers, to a situation where that changes.
Yeah, and it's far more likely to happen these days simply because women are likely to live longer, so past their mid-80s, possibly into their 90s. But women are likely to have a much wider range of both physical and mental conditions which require them to have more care than would otherwise be the case.
So this is where this idea of managing your aging parents come in. It's a change.
Yes, and it's not particularly age specific. There are some conditions, for example, Alzheimer's, which can begin in the early 70s, and it can vary a lot. And just at the same time, there are a lot of people in their 80s and 90s who are perfectly fine physically and mentally. But to remind you that from a legal perspective, the law actually has an attitude that there are some objective tests as to how well you're managing. One of them, for example, is when we hit the age of 75, we're required to have a medical assessment every year to ensure that we can keep on driving.
Yes, well look, driving is a really tricky issue, isn't it? Because having to give up driving is a really big concession to make, and a lot of people are very unhappy and destabilised by that.
Yeah, and look, and it's one of the indicators that I used about my mother's condition was that there was a point when I realised that I was terrified when I was driving in the car when she was driving and I was the passenger, and I wouldn't let her drive anymore. She just seemed to be totally unaware of the traffic signals. And then one day the magistrate took the same view and he took her licence away from her, and that really was devastating. But it was a lot safer for the rest of the world. But apart from that sort of thing, which is probably fairly obvious, you would notice that your parent is not managing the things that they used to do fairly well. For example, they start to burn saucepans on the stove, or they leave things on the stove, or they forget where they put their keys. They put the keys into the fridge. Or they have repetitive conversations and they don't remember the answers they gave last time.
Look, many of us watching, including myself, well, we lose our keys, we forget people's names. These are the sorts of things, bad signs we should be looking out for.
We all do that when we're a bit stressed, you know. But the sort of behaviour that I'm talking about is far more consistent behaviour. And it's usually accompanied by other simple signs. For example, the parent can no longer write coherently, or they can't manage those things, for example, the technical things. For example, like managing a computer, they just can't seem to find their way with that anymore.
And sometimes your parents can't actually recognise that they're losing their abilities to do these kinds of things, and they're unwilling to acknowledge that they need help.
Yeah. I mean, it's not surprising that if you're a very competent person that you're going to deny that anything's happening, and perhaps they can become quite aggressive about that denial. Why should they agree that anything has changed? But partly, one of the other problems with this, that conditions like various forms of dementia is accompanied by personality changes. So some people can become really depressed. They're unable to get out of bed in the morning. They don't want to have showers. Other people can become extremely aggressive. So there's a number of things that are going on here.
So we've talked about cognitive decline, but there's physical decline too. You may be mentally very sharp, but you can't get out of the house to go shopping.
Yeah.
So you need help with those kind of physical things too.
And this is really what I'm suggesting, is that your siblings, your partner, anyone who is involved with your parent at some level, start to have conversations about how to manage this transition phase. You might think, so calling meetings without the parent initially to talk about what do you think should happen in the future. Now, you might think this is fairly straightforward, but really, I think you'll find there's a lot of disagreement in this area. People can have some quite different views about how things should progress.
Different views and different ways of sort of managing the situation, different ways of communication. I have a friend who is having a difficulty with her sister. So the friend wants to have a more consultative relationship with the parent, ask the parent what they think, what they would like, whereas the sibling is very much you should, you must, you have to. And even this communication is causing a difficulty. I mean, you are speaking with another adult, and that adult is a parent, but they deserve respect.
That's right, I would agree with you, and I don't think that anybody wants to be told what they should do, so I prefer the consultative approach myself. But having these conversations, I mean, that's a really good example, I think, but there are lots of other conversations which deal a lot more with the finances, and one of the really major issues is you're going to need your parent, if they go into an aged care facility, they're going to need a large deposit to go into the facility. So we're talking about $500,000 probably. So what should happen to the family home? Should it be sold? And I think you'll find that siblings can vary an awful lot about what they think should happen.
That's a really big decision, isn't it? Selling the family home. And I think people are quite shocked when they realise what you have to pay in order to get a place in a nursing home, that it is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And it will often require selling the major asset. I guess another option might be that one of the adult children says, well, look, you're not coping very well, come and live with me, I've got a granny flat or I've got a spare room. Is that a good option?
Look, I think it can work very well in some cases where both the parent and the child agree. But I think one should be realistic about the amount of time that you actually need to provide that care for a parent. It's actually extremely time consuming. There are many medical appointments. There are perhaps at home services that are being supplied. That person might need help with their showering and their dressing. And what if the child has got their own children to look after and they're working? When are they going to have time to be able to do the caring that is actually needed?
And that is a very common situation now, isn't it? With people having children later, people living longer, that you can be dealing with perhaps teenage children, elderly parents, and you might be even in the peak years of your earning capacity, your career.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
And the reality of caring for someone is that person is going to be more and more dependent and is going to have less and less capacity over time. We're not talking about simply 6 months. We're talking possibly many, many years. And that carer can have feelings of where they're doing all of it themselves. There's feelings of being very tired, about grief for what is going on with their parent. There can be loneliness because they have no one else to share this experience with. And really a carer needs to have support for themselves as well while they're doing the caring. I met someone recently who was, she had been the carer for her partner for around about 10 years. He was diagnosed with a form of cancer that did not recover after the various bouts, and in fact each time has required more and more hospital visits and more visits, more and more day-to-day care. You have a person, the carer has become very, very tired in that process.
And from the other perspective, a parent doesn't want to lose independence, autonomy, all of those sorts of things that they have to give up, and they may be very reluctant to do so.
Yeah, and that's very understandable. They've been running their own lives very successfully. They're saying, well, I'm all right, I can manage as well as I need to. But it's in this, and assuming that your parent is in that sort of stage where they're saying, I can manage, all right, I will mention my tedious issue about having a will. Make sure your parent has done their will. Because having a will is better than having no will, because it stops so much family disagreement. And if your parent is really well organised, they can say, well, okay, I can appoint a power of attorney, do an enduring guardianship, all that, or an advanced care directive, all these sorts of things that we've talked about earlier in this series.
Yes, I will refer everyone to episode 1, where we take people through the importance of making a will and what power of attorney and enduring power of attorney is. Really important to have all of that in place and have those conversations early. So, Alice, let's say that a person wants to stay in their own home. They feel they can manage, but they might just need a bit of help in order to do that. What can be done to make sure that can happen?
Well, the first thing that you would do is to say, that if you're not living with a parent, you need to be checking in on them quite regularly. I mean, you might do things like phone calls every day, or make sure that you're visiting at least once a week. But the reality is that your parent might have a fall today, but you're not visiting for another few days, or you don't call for another couple of days. Your parent might be lying there on the floor, unable to move, unable to communicate, and in a lot of pain. So one of the things I would suggest for a parent who's living at home is that they wear one of these personal alarm pendants that they can have. And that way at least your parent can contact you if anything happens to them physically. There are probably also more mundane strategies that you should put in place. For example, organising the automatic payments of bills as they arrive, the debit payments. So that you've got to know the password so that you can organise this on the parents' accounts. But that makes that one less thing to worry about for everybody concerned. And the other thing is, of course, that you would go with your parent to the ATM to give them some cash so they've got some money, and also going and doing the shopping with them. You need to actually keep track of what's going on in their bank accounts. So that you know what monies are coming in, what monies are going out. This is actually a very useful thing, just in case, the scammers sort of have access just by chance, and that happens a lot more these days.
Well, we know from surveys, and I guess from our own feelings about this, that we would want to stay in our own homes as long as we possibly can. And so there are things you can put in place to make that possible for a longer period, aren't there? Yeah,
so this means that one of the things you would think about at an early stage in terms of planning is to be having home care services brought into the house. Okay, so the very first thing you need to do is to register on the new portal, the My Aged Care portal, and that enables you to access additional care for your parent. So there's it's all online these days. I think we've got an online contact attached.
We do. Owen has some very good resources about My Aged Care that take you through what is a bit of a labyrinth, to be honest, but it's a really good introduction to the steps in terms of registering with My Aged Care and then what happens after that.
Yeah, or you can ring them on 1800 200 422. This is an essential step these days in terms of getting additional services for your parent.
Now, I know that dealing with my aged care, it can be very, very time consuming. And so even if you've made appointments and you've made contact, it actually can take quite a long time to actually get services in place, even if you may need them rather desperately.
Yes, I've heard that too. And although the government has promised to put more money into this service, I don't know that it's changed a good deal. Nevertheless, if you're a carer, that's the first thing is what you should be doing is to register to have your parent assessed. The assessment is carried out by an ACAT assessor who will determine the level of support that your parent can receive.
That's right, and they come to your home and do that. So what happens in that assessment?
All right, an ACAT assessor can be usually a nurse or a social worker or an occupational therapist, that kind of person who's used to dealing with older people. And the ACAT is part of the ACAT stands for Aged Care Assessment Team. Often an ACAT referral can come for if your parent goes into hospital for some reason. The hospital social worker will send a referral to ACAT to organise to have your parent assessed.
So it might be an intimidating experience to have someone coming and questioning your competence, perhaps. And you might be tempted to sort of put on your best face. And I have heard people doing this where they really are putting a slightly rosy glow on their ability to manage at home.
Yeah, look, the assessor's role is to find out what level of support does the person need. So they will ask questions about, what medications are you taking? How mobile are you? Can you manage your own meals? Can you clean the house adequately? What sort of level of support are you getting from your family or friends? And of course, when the person's answering those questions, the assessor is making a decision about how mentally capable is that person. But obviously it's a bit shameful to sort of admit that you need this sort of help. So it's a good thing for the parent to have somebody with them, their carer with them, at the time of having the assessment so that the assessor actually gets a more realistic view of what's actually going on.
Well, say you are assessed as being eligible for some support, perhaps it might be a cleaner. Does that happen straight away or what happens next?
Oh, no. So you've got some months before you get a recommendation as to what level of support the parent should get. Now, of course, the thing is it's really important for you to know, even if you're not living with the parent, to know what is actually going on so that you actually do know what medication they need and you do know whether they can manage their own banking or not, because these are the sorts of things that are skills that go relatively early in the piece. So once you've got the assessment, you then, the carer, need to find a provider of these services. So there's a lot of competition in this area, as it seems. So you'd look for a home care services provider in your area, and you'd say, okay, my parents been assessed for a level 1 or a level 2 level of support, and how much do you charge? And then there's this issue about how much is it going to cost. So your parent might be assessed for household tasks, cleaning once a week for 2 hours. How much is it going to cost? So they understand that what happens is that there is a government subsidy for whatever level you've been assessed for, but that money doesn't go to your parent; it goes to the provider. All right, and they allocate that money firstly on admin fees, let me just say, and then for somebody to come in and do that work for you. It's possible though that your parent might have to pay additional fees because there's an income test associated with that as well. So at the lowest levels you might get, say, 2 hours of cleaning. At the highest level of care, your parent might need help with personal care, so showering, dressing, wound care, that kind of thing.
This all really sounds really quite complicated for a person themselves to manage, and I guess this is where your adult child, your carer, comes in. Mm-hmm. And Alice, it's sounding a little bit like a part-time job to manage all of this stuff on behalf of somebody else.
Yeah, look, I think it's a lot of work involved in it. And of course, the other thing is that, say that you've waited, you've had the assessment, you've gone to the provider, you then have to wait months before you actually can get the services into your house. There have been cases, unfortunately, where people have died while waiting for those carers to that service to be provided.
And of course, I guess a hospital stay may happen during the course of all of this being organised. A fall is often the case.
Yes.
An illness of different kinds. And then you're in a situation of trying to assess whether a person can actually return home and manage.
And that's really one of the things that the hospital social worker will recommend at that point. And I think, as I've said earlier, that it's not unusual to go from a hospital straight into respite care. And in a way, that is actually easier because, as we've said, people often don't want to leave their homes. And that saying about, you'll have to take me out in a box is very common. So it's not until someone actually has a hospital stay that, they can make the transition from the home into institutional care. So normally it goes in, a person goes in on a respite basis. So that is a maximum of about 63 days where they pay the equivalent of 85% of their pension, of the pension allowance. To stay there. They don't have to make a deposit if they go in on a respite care basis.
So at least this gives a couple of months for respite for both parties.
Yes.
Time to a plan and time to assess whether the nursing home they're in is a good one.
Yeah.
Very difficult to find a good place.
Yes. And
also an adjustment period because it's a massive adjustment.
Look, it really is, and the thing is that doing it from a hospital stay, it's kind of easier than having that in-between stage where the parent is becoming more fragile, more unsteady, more mentally perhaps not as sharp as they were, and not able to make decisions. So going into respite care is actually a good period to make those decisions about whether that's really where they need to stay long term. Choosing the right aged care facility is really difficult because, as you've said, finding a bed is difficult. And is it a good home? Well, if you're waiting, if you urgently need respite care, you'll be glad for any kind of bed. But maybe long term you would be looking for something else.
So what are you looking for?
Look, there are many issues in the area of aged care, residential care, and it's a big subject in itself that I don't think we've got time to do in any kind of detail today. There are questions of the fees payable, and the services that are provided, and that's really the main issues, I suppose. But let me just say, I think we talked earlier about the deposits that are payable. The minimum deposits these days are around about $500,000, but they can be as much as $1 million to go into a fancy aged care home. So that is obviously an issue that you would need to think about. But for me, one of the most important things is actually, is the home close to you where you live? Are you able to go and visit your parent regularly? And I think this is very important in terms of maintaining your parents' mental health and also to make sure that they are being properly cared for. Because there are other things in an aged care home. For example, when my mother went into an aged care home, one of the things that I was really concerned about was, did the home have a garden? Because I wanted to be able to take my mother outside so she could sit in the sun and breathe, have a change of air, not air-conditioned air, just be able to breathe and be outside, because I thought it was good for her mental health.
Yes, and one thing to really look out for when you're visiting are the interactions between the residents and the staff.
Yeah.
Do staff members have a name tag with their name on it?
Yeah.
How do they speak to residents? How do they speak with visitors?
Yes.
Is a really good thing to really pay attention to.
Yeah, and does the home welcome visitors? Are they in to say, well, look, you can come along for meals if you want to with your parent. You can come along to our events because quite often they have entertainment, and they say, well, you can come along. Why don't you do that? You want to be able to look at the sort of food that is being served to your parent. You want to see those interactions. I think are really important. And you've got to remember, I think, that most aged care staff are poorly trained, poorly paid. Quite often they're recent migrants to this country, so there are language difficulties. And they're quite stressed. A lot of the providers in aged care homes, as far as I can see, are trying to cut corners. They're always pushing their staff to hurry up and be somewhere else. So you get these episodes of rough, it's called rough handling, which is kind of, if you're an older, fragile person, it's very easy to get bumped or scratched or something like that. So you, as a regular visitor, you want to be able to see that your parent is doing all right, that there are no unexpected bruises or scratches on them, that they may not be able to articulate what has happened, but you want to be able to observe for yourself that what is going on in that place.
And that's why I think that safety in nursing homes is a really big issue for the Older Women's Network to advocate on.
Absolutely.
And we want to see some really significant improvements in that area. So look, it's a really hard life stage.
Yes.
None of us really want to do it. You talked about your own mother going into nursing home care. How does it usually go for people?
Very variable is what I would say. I can give you stories from both sides. Some where it's been very successful, some where definitely not successful. I'll give you the success story. My partner's mother went in willingly, wanted to go, but she lived in a smaller town. She had friends who were already there. It was a small facility, and she was fine. There were people she knew, and she knew that she wasn't managing very well on her own. She knew that. She did not want to be a burden on her family. That's what she said. On the other hand, my experiences the other way is residents who complained continuously about being there, who tried to leave, all that kind of thing, who never adjust to the experience of being in an aged care facility. And really, that's quite understandable, because you've gone from your home, the home that you've known, which is all the rooms that are in that place, to one room. And that one room is a sterile, one bedroom, and you might have a few of your treasured items there, but that's really all you have there, And then outside, it's a dining room, and there are people that you don't know. So some people don't adjust very well to it at all. But the reality is they're not likely to be coming home.
Yes, that's right. That's the difficulty, the realisation, isn't it, that you're not going to be moving on after that stay in the nursing home. Well, Alice, look, as we've been discussing, there's no doubt that this can be a really difficult stage of life. Of course, for the older person who might have to move into nursing home care or have a lot of compromises on their autonomy and their independence. But look, there are some positive aspects in being able to spend some, quality time with an ageing parent at this stage of life. And that's what we're going to talk about now. And now I'd like to introduce our guest, Maria Lamari. And Maria is a capturer of stories. Maria, thank you so much for joining Planning for the Unexpected today. We're really looking forward to hearing about your work. But tell me, you look after your mother. Tell me, what are the practicalities of doing that?
Well, Mum's in a nursing home. She's 94, and it was great because Mum decided to go in. I live an hour away from Mum, and I wanted her to come and live with me, but she didn't want to be a burden. And also it would have meant taking her away from her suburb and her family and her friends that she'd known for 60 years. So it was much better to have her where she wanted to go. So the nursing home does a lot of that. They take away the medical side of it for me and everything. So it's fantastic. The entertainment is wonderful. She has a great time in there. So the practicalities are that I know that she's safe. and I know that she's happy, and that makes a really big difference. So yeah.
It does indeed. And tell me, has the dynamic between you and your mother changed with her in institutional care, and you live an hour away? So how has that changed things between you?
I think, to be honest, that it's actually brought us closer together because we can both relax. I don't have to have stress thinking I've got to get her to a doctor's appointment or whatever. So we can actually just relax, enjoy each other's company. And, if I go down and join into the entertainment with her or whatever that is. Also with COVID, what happened was they started video calls. So now I can ring her on video call as well. So I don't have to actually always drive down there. So yeah, it's great.
And you've mentioned quite a few positive things about the nursing home. You've mentioned there's entertainment and there's friendship. What are the positive aspects of the nursing home that make it a happy place for your mother?
Well, number one, the staff. They're always keen to turn up. They're always, each family, each member of the residents, they're just important to each one of those staff. The lifestyle team is amazing. Every day they have theme day, Greek day, Italian day, Indian day, whatever. They have dances and they really, really keep them active. So they play games, whatever. Mum loves playing bingo and grabbing a chocolate, like all those little things. Yeah, she's just so happy there. So
Oh, that's
yeah.
great to hear. Now, you've discovered that tapping into people's memories of women like your mother, she's in her 90s, she's lived a big life, can be a really positive kind of topic for conversation and even a project between an older person and an adult child. So tell me more about your work and how it came up.
Okay, so I guess really I've always been interested in family histories from a little girl. I was always interested in hearing the dynamics, curious about what people, went through to make them who they are today, all the connections. So I started really when I started documenting it with my mother-in-law's story because she was married by proxy in Italy and came out. Her mum died at her birth, and it was just, I just knew that if my in-laws passed away, we would lose all of that history. We wouldn't know what boat they came out on, we wouldn't know anything. So about 18 years ago, I decided to take the project of doing that and putting that together. And it was very basic at that time. So then what happened was that was really interesting. I had a lot of fun doing it too. It brings you closer to people, I think. That's what I find. And then with my mum's side of the family, with her story, one of my cousins had done a lot of family tree work and it was just sitting in her filing cabinet. And sadly, my cousin got pancreatic cancer. So I thought, you know what, before anything happens, I'm going to put this into a story for you so you can see all of your work. So I gathered all my cousins together, or a lot of them together, and we sat around the table for about 7 hours and they recounted what they remembered and I was I was transcribing this, I was recording the whole time. Very hard when all these people are talking over the top of each other. And so that it was fun. They laughed, they cried, they contradicted each other, which was quite funny. And I'd heard things that I hadn't heard before, so I managed to then do a lot of research, put it all together in a story, which I've got that one here. So I just do it. Yeah. So I just tracked it back, my grandparents' journey from Italy. And it was great. It was wonderful. So since then, I've just had a keen interest. People get sick of me saying, "Hey, do you want to put that in a story? You should do a story." So yeah.
So how do people react when you first maybe broach the idea, that you'd like to maybe more formally record some of their memories?
People love it, and then I think the biggest thing is they wonder, what have they got to tell to put in a story? There's nothing really fantastic about their lives, but once you start talking about it and getting the framework and getting the basics, people actually start getting into it and they really love recounting that work. So yeah.
You mentioned a framework. So do you have a kind of a format that you use with people?
I do. It's my own little basic thing from my legal secretary days where you've got to put everything in chronological order. So that's helped me. So I do. I find that what I do is I start with this framework of where they were born, what their parents were, like what they did as a child, schools. I just build it up like that. Friendships. Then I sort of do it in decades. Do a very simple one. And then what happens is I build the whole framework and then I go back and visit it. And then we build on it. So I find that the easiest way. Um,
Now, are you recording this on your phone, or how do you actually record the conversation?
I take a paper and a pen with me as well, because I jot any notes down if I want to go back to something or if I need to research something or whatever. So I do that. I record it on, I've got a little dictaphone, so I record it on a voice recorder. But I found that as a backup, I always record it on my phone, because you just don't know if it's going to press erase by mistake. So that's how I do it. And that's what we do.
Wow. And do you find that once you introduce a topic, say, for example, what are your memories from school, or that people actually can remember a lot of detail, or is it all a bit fuzzy?
No, I think they remember specific things. And if you actually ask a question like, oh, did you have a teacher you didn't like? Or, what did you have at lunch for lunchtime? It sort of triggers memories in them. And you sort of also get to know what the person like, if they're focused on food or friendships or music or dancing. So you ask about their hobbies, and did they do any sports? And all of a sudden some of them forget. And then like, oh yes, I actually did do this. And then you actually expand on it. So it's great.
I imagine there might be, of course, with all of us, certain sort of sensitive areas, things we don't want to be reminded of, very sad things that have happened in people's lives. So how do you tread your way around that?
Okay. I did have one particular lady that I did her story, and she said to me that she had a lot of sad memories and a lot of abuse. And so what we do is I don't dismiss it. I actually ask them if they want to talk about it. And sometimes they say yes. And sometimes they say, I want to talk about it, but I don't want it recorded. I'm just reading them. I'm just really sensitive to what they want. I ask them if they would like to speak to a counsellor about it, because I'm very mindful I'm not a counsellor. I don't want to go into too much depth and say the wrong thing. So, yeah. And then in the story itself, I will put, there was a traumatic time, there was a traumatic event at this such and such an age, or something, like just to allude to it, but not go into detail unless they want to. Yeah.
And of course, some older people, over the age of 80, may have some cognitive decline.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you can't really do a project like this with them?
Not at all. You can, as we sort of going to speak about, music or photos. So you can show them a photo, and that's what I do with my mum sometimes. I'll show her a photo. She can't remember someone just by thinking about it. I'll show her the photo and she go, oh, yes, that's so-and-so. She can point them out. But also, it doesn't really matter how much of their story you capture. It's capturing them. You know what I mean? So you start where they're at and what they remember. I find also with some people I've worked with, I feel like it causes a bit of pressure on them if you're trying to dig for a memory and they can't remember. So I sort of wash over that a little bit and try and focus on what they can remember. And it doesn't really matter how short it is. Like, even if you get 2 pages with photos, it's beautiful, so yeah.
And I guess, look, when you're visiting someone regularly in their own home or in a nursing home, sometimes it's hard to find things to talk about, isn't it, if you're a regular visitor? And so
Absolutely.
I guess this gives a nice focused topic that you can focus on a different aspect
Absolutely.
during
Yeah,
different visits.
you can. And every week you can go in, like, they don't know you're going to do that, but you go in with a subject you wanted to talk about today. Oh, well, and ask me about this. And it just connects you on a different level. I think we always see our parents as parents, and all of a sudden it makes them into I don't want to say humans, but do you know what I mean? It takes that role away and you see them as an equal with you, really. So,
Yes, and it's particularly important because we've been talking about how often this stage of life involves a child, an adult child, having to manage to some extent their parent, and it can be a very awkward and difficult flip on the usual relationship. So I guess this balances things out. You're an interesting person, and I want to know about your life.
yeah.
And also, you mentioned prompts too. You can bring along photos, family photos. You can maybe play some music as a prompt, because that really resonates with people, even who might be suffering dementia or Alzheimer's. Music is very important.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with my mum on the video last week and she was falling asleep. And so I played a song that her dad used to sing, like they used to play in Italian, and I played it and she woke up immediately. And yeah, she just went, oh, okay. She sort of recognized it and probably brought her back to that time, So yeah, it was good.
And Maria, I know you also capture the stories of people who might be in the palliative care stage of life too, that even when people are really quite ill, you can still do this work with them.
Absolutely. There's a big scope there. I retired and I was looking for something to do. So I actually found this ad for volunteer for palliative care stories. And I love storytelling. So I went along and I've been doing that for 5 years now, and it's just so rewarding. So it's you notice with the younger people, they've got sort of like regrets, right, that they're not going to see. But with the older people, they light up and they're like, wow, this is what I've done with my life. And then when you actually present the work, they're just so, I don't know, they just feel so special, So yeah, it's cool. And then for the younger ones, we actually do books for the kids as well. So we actually do the stories for the children from the mum, and we just write them out so they've got memories as well. So capture a big, scope of it. And it's probably my greatest. I just love doing it. I love doing people who are still here and their stories, but people that are going to pass and do their stories and they know they're leaving a legacy. It's wonderful.
And Maria, I think you've got some examples there using some of the apps for photo books that you can use now that are really quite user friendly. I've had a go and was surprisingly easy, really, to make something really beautiful with photographs and other memories. Yeah?
I'll show you. So there's different ways that I actually prepare the books. So that is just like a A4 bound document, photos, whatever. Very, very easy and simple to do. I did that for my mother-in-law as well, but that's a shorter one. And I have fun doing the chapter headings, making the headings, like it's cool. This is a published book I did for a guy in the US who had ALS, and he was a friend of my daughter that they met up in New Zealand. And she said, you have to tell his story. And that's what I was going to say too. There's no limit to communication now. So he was in the US. So we spoke every week on Facebook Messenger, and I thought it was just going to be like 4 weeks work or something, like, what I normally do. But no, he wanted a book. And so we made his dream come true, which was absolutely wonderful. And through this, because he was an only child and his parents died when he was in his 20s, through this, I actually asked him to get his DNA done. And just when we were about to print, he rang me and said, you're not going to believe it. 2 girls have rung me and they're my half sisters, and my dad's still alive with alcohol-induced dementia. And he got another 14 months with these girls that were 3 hours away from him, their families, and it was just incredible. So that story to him, and then getting on Amazon, everyone buying it, like his friends and stuff, was just amazing. So that's just such a pinnacle of all the work.
Wow.
This is my niece that passed away, but I did a story for her kids. And again, this is done by Photo Book, which is so simple because I actually didn't realize, but there's so much text you can put in. So the Photo Book is the easiest option as well. long as you know how to set it up. And then just recently, I just published a book for my cousin. Not published,
Wow.
we printed a book for my cousin, and that's been a big work. So
That is a big book. Yeah.
it's a big book. So yeah, so there's so many different ways that you can capture a story. And as I said, communication now is no limit. Like you can't say, well, they live too far away because there's phone, there's video. I know with the older people, it might be a little bit harder, but yeah.
Wow. Well, look, many of us who always intended to have that conversation with our parents or our great aunts and uncles, I guess really feel that we should encourage other people to take advantage of the time that you have and to start that conversation of recording memories.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say too, like one of my girlfriends, her mum was going to pass, and I kept saying, like, we knew this for a year, and I kept saying, let's do her story, let's do her story. I want to do her story. And she's like, oh yeah, but never made the time. And then after she passed away, she said, oh, I wish I would have done that. And I wish I would have put all her recipes in. And I thought, well, it was only that you didn't make it a priority. All right. That's the thing. So yeah, and I had another friend of mine or neighbour the other day say, I wish I would have documented all my dad's stories from the war. I wish I would have written all that down, because you forget as you go on. And yeah, I'm so passionate about it that I drive people nuts. But yeah.
No, look, it's a wonderful work you're doing, and I'm sure it'll encourage other people to get started. There's no time like the present.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Maria Lamari. That was terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you very much.
Wasn't that great, Alice?
It was. I really wish that I could have known someone like Maria to record my parents' stories, which I thought was so interesting, and now I really regret not having some record of what their lives were like.
Me too. Now, Alice, look, the reality for most of us is that we're going to live longer. Our parents are living into their 80s and into their 90s. So caring, managing our aging parents really is going to be a reality for a lot of us.
It certainly is. And we're going to be part of that sandwich generation for many years. We've got caring for our partners, our children, our grandchildren, and then our aging parents, all at the same time. It's going to be a challenging time.
Look, the good thing is there are now a lot of resources, online resources, counselling, to help people get through this stage, and we'll put some relevant links on the OWN website, so seek them out. So Alice, our last episode next month, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about one of those interesting topics, and that's downsizing, the pros, the cons, and the practicalities. Wait to see you then.
Thank you, Alice.
Bye for now.
Thanks everyone for joining us today for episode 5. And of course, you can find all the episodes on the OWN website and the OWN YouTube channel. So it's bye from me, Amanda Armstrong.